Welcome everyone. Welcome to the Civil Service Data Challenge semi-final. We're all really excited to have you here today. We are in your hands, very excited to hear your presentation.
Good morning. Thanks for having us here today. We are SmartQ, using innovation and automation to drive value for civil service colleagues and the general public. I'd now like to hand you over to the mastermind of this concept, one of Border Force's principal analysts, Head of National Planning for Border Force, our product owner, Lucy Barnes.
Thank you. So we've all experienced queues where we're coming back into the country, or on the media, newspapers, 4 or 5 hour queues, Heathrow, etc., etc. But what might surprise you is that it is currently a manual process in the majority of ports to record those queue times. To go through the process is we have one of our officers with a stopwatch who will record when a passenger reaches what they deem to be the back of the queue, and will wait and record until they go through the control point. This is then manually transcribed on a piece of paper and then uploaded on a spreadsheet to then be collated by the centre to then come up with management information for senior leaders. Now, in some ports, we do that 4 times an hour, and some only once. Now, the problem with that is that there isn't a general queue definition. So if you have multiple officers, even in the same port, recording, they may be recording from different points. We have data quality issues from that, and also having discrete points of data means that sometimes we miss actually events that cause queue creation. Now, with all those issues, when we're using that information for, say, analysis or model builds, it means that we struggle to verify accurately those models. Some of those models are used for more strategic projects, some of the multi-million pounds projects, such in the 5 systems, if you're aware of the Home Office work there. And we are unable to accurately, verify them and really get into the lower depths of what passenger queue creation looks like and how it's affected. So there are some automation systems out there. They are port operator owned. Border Force do not own them, which comes up with some data management issues. And actually, a lot of the time, ports recall that actually they're not that accurate, and they're not representing what they're seeing on the ground. I'm going to hand over to our data scientist and media expert, Chris Hyland.
Thanks, Lucy. So, as well as Lucy's first-hand experience, we've also gathered evidence of the needs and pain points of several key user groups, including passengers and a range of civil servants. We've drawn on existing Home Office research where it exists, and we've complemented that with our own social media analysis of passenger experiences, and also regular engagement with several Home Office staff. And a key theme that emerged from our social media analysis of passenger experiences is that for many passengers, it's not having an idea of what queue lengths are likely to be can mean they can't plan aspects of their journeys. So the first tweet here is somebody having to ask the internet at large if anybody knows how long queue times generally are at Heathrow Terminal 5 in order that they could plan onwards train travel, and sadly they got no replies. And the second demonstrates that when border control occurs before you travel, not having a good sense of what those times are likely to be can mean that you miss transport altogether. Now, to run through our solutions to all the problems Lucy and I have laid out, now I'm going to hand over to Richard. Richard is a data engineer at the Office for National Statistics and a technical architect for SmartQ. Richard.
Thanks, Chris. We've explored a number of options, and I'm going to take you through them very briefly. So at the top, we looked at some hardware options, but they ultimately were too expensive. We worked out some solutions around semi-autonomous methods, similar to how a supermarket stock takes. But ultimately, we ended up needing more staff time than Border Force could use. And so we ended up with 2 solutions based around linking existing data sources. And these are the 2 solutions that we're going to take you through today. So first of all, we need to define our problem. When a passenger arrives at a port, either by rail, air, or sea, the first thing they do is arrive at the gate. And so the key milestones, the 3 key milestones we're going to establish in this problem are, the first one is they arrive at the gate. They then walk from the gate to the back of the arrivals hall. That marks our second milestone. They queue in the passport control area until they scan their passport, and that is our third milestone. It's the end of our definition of a queue. So what we tried to do was find those key milestones in existing data sources that we had access to. So looking at the data, the first data source we need is API. Advanced Passenger Information records information about who's traveling. Most of you will be familiar with API. It's made up from the information that you submit as passengers a couple of days ahead of you flying, for example. Importantly for us, there's one feed of API that gets updated with the arrival gate and port time. So that's our first milestone hit. Border Force have a second data set called Border Force walk times, which records the time it takes to go from the gate to the back of the arrivals hall. And we have a third data set, Border Crossings, BX, which records the time a passenger scans their passport. If we can link these three data sets together, and if we can find the same passengers through these three data sets through linkage, then we can match their data journey back to their physical journey and automatically calculate how long they were queuing for. API and BX both contain personally identifiable information, PII, so we have to be careful about how we link those data sources. And the two solutions that we've got are essentially two different ways of handling the PII linkage problem safely. The first method is to hash the data inside the secure environment and take a real-time feed of the hashed data out into the processing environment where we link it on the third source and produce the queues. This has the advantage that we need to do less to the feed of data we require, but we're slightly less able to adjust for errors in the data set when we link. The second option is we discovered that the Home Office already has something called an IBM Big Match system, which is able to securely link API and BX. This system is able to use more of the PII for linkage, so we were able to adjust for errors in the data set more easily. The problem with this solution is that at present they batch process and batch feed data, and it doesn't produce the real-time feed we need, but we're currently working with them to look at the engineering requirements of how we would modify that. On to the final slide. We've been through quite a lot of technical stuff, but essentially we've got two solutions that we are ready to take forward. Both of them are based on linking existing data sources to generate this new feed of data. And both of them are based around handling the PII linkage safely. They'll produce accurate passenger-level queue data for the UK for the first time, and they'll cover over 120 million passenger journeys per year. I'm now going to hand you back to Chris, who's going to show us what the solution might look like.
Thanks, Richard. So to start exploring how this data could be presented to passengers to best meet their needs, we've built a working prototype of a web application called Find Passport Control Wait Times, using, of course, dummy data for now, sadly. It allows passengers to choose a particular port. They can choose to view times for today, the past, or a future date. And if they choose today, they can see the current wait time, recorded wait times earlier in the day, and estimated wait times later in the day, assuming this analysis was conducted. And because hypothetically this would just be a public website, deploying this to ports across the country could be as simple as printing A4 sheets of paper with a link that takes passengers straight to the right page. And now to summarise, I'm going to hand back to Dave. Dave is a delivery lead at the Future Border and Immigration Systems team at the Home Office and a project manager for SmartQ. Dave.
Thanks, Chris. So, you've heard the problem, and as is from Lucy. We've seen some examples of user experience with Chris. Richard has given an excellent insight into how we would leverage existing data sets with an innovative and rapidly scalable approach. Chris has then shown us the art of the possible with a GDS-compliant, easy-to-use customer-facing service. We will enable cross-government collaboration through data sharing. CDDO work with government organisations to achieve digital data and technology transformation at scale. We believe the SmartQ project delivers precisely that we can surpass good and provide a great service, delivering an enhanced customer journey, promoting trust and a reliable service experience. And so on to the next steps. So we hope to secure your sponsorship today to take this idea forwards, finalise the approach and enable a solution to further develop relations with stakeholders. We'll conceptualise the MI dashboard, potentially leveraging existing Home Office technology such as Vantage, or using a commercial off-the-shelf COTS product to build a bespoke item. We will define the MVP for the initial 50k investment and detail a high-level roadmap. We'll firm up the benefits and impact, which is data set dependent. Either approach will drive considerable value add. Beyond the early expected low development and delivery costs, scalability is rapid and comes with little increase in overheads. That concludes this presentation. We've been SmartQ. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much. Okay, we've got 15 minutes for questions. Who wants to kick us off?
Hi team, we've met previously, so nice to see you getting a great update. I was actually in Manchester Airport Arrivals Hall last week after a whole stack of flights arrived from Abu Dhabi, and the queue was going right out the back. It was a very cramped Terminal 1 Arrivals Hall there. I share that just for context of having seen the reality of this. I guess you're really clear on the solution, but I'd like to understand more about benefits. And I guess, Lucy, starting with yourself, what benefits do Border Force seniors see from having far better quality MI on queue wait times?
I think one of the large ones, obviously I've spoken about strategic modelling and things, better models, being able to make better decisions. But currently, if a minister were to ask what is the queue time at a certain place, we're unable to give that information. And I think that's a real big one, because it's a lot of ministerial focus about queue times. We talk a lot about queue times at the SLT level, and we're able to say at 9 a.m. it was this, but we're not unable to sort of give any more in-depth. Twitter is the first response, oh, it's really long. It would be good for us to be able to push back on that, I feel.
And so I completely get that. We've all had ministerial complaints when they've gone through a busy airport. Well, their friends have, or they've got lots of friends. Do you think it will enable Border Force to better, more efficiently deploy its officers?
Hugely. If we think of this project as like a foundational project, it's kind of like day dot, like getting that really understanding what is going on and how. It then filters up into some of those strategic products, but understanding how many officers do I have today? What does the queue like? What are the other demand elements that are adding to this? Does that mean I need to train more staff in particular areas? Or does it actually mean that they need to be deployed on a different day? Am I over-resourcing on some bits or under-resourcing on another? That's where this kind of all fills into like my own kind of planning capability. I need to understand what the queues are today to be able to simulate and verify what it may look like in the future if there is a reduction of headcount, if there is increases in particular training. And it all kind of is in that ecosystem of, if I understand what a queue is now, I can now look into predictive simulations of what that might look like in the future.
Yeah. And have you been able to cost any financial benefit from more accurate deployment of Border Force staff, or is that a next step?
So it's slightly beyond this. This is a fundamental piece. There is another piece around staffing deployment and understanding that a bit better. But ultimately, there could be a £10 million per year saving if we more accurately deploy staff. So that is not just the queue stuff, that's other stuff as well, because of the amount of money that we spend on contracts and things and people not being quite in the right place at the right time. That's the kind of figure we'd be looking at annual saving.
Thank you.
There are some advantages outside of, I don't know if you want us to go through this. We spoke, for example, to the Department for Transport and discussed with their analysis team about this new data set, and they were really keen. They actually gave us a statement to use. We ran out of space on our slide, but the DFT analysis team said they would use this data set. They said it'd be really helpful for their planning and their resilience planning at borders as well. So I think there are going to be this data set would be useful outside of Border Force as well.
Thank you. So I'm Aydin from HMRC. That was fantastic. Thank you. Anything that reduces queue times at airports, I'm all for, believe me. So you had me at queue. So two questions. So the first question is, have you looked at other countries and if anyone does this really well? And you know, who are they, and talk a little bit about
So America already kind of does this. Yeah. And you can today go on a website, if you just search American airport queues, and they have a website that you can go on and you can look at today what that looks like. So that that's why one of our big benefits is like, well, if Americans do that, we can do that too. It's not a very pretty system. What Chris was showing is actually far more slick and kind of cleaner, but it's a good example of American can do it. Therefore, this is definitely achievable, I feel, for the UK.
Yeah, and several other countries as well. I think Canada's got a very similar system. It's probably a growing passenger expectation that something like this is available.
I mean, honestly, Disneyland has better apps that let you check queue times. Yeah, so.
And I think that's the opportunity to speak to those that have done this, how have they done it, and the benefits of doing so. And that will strengthen your case even further. And the second question is just a really low-level one. When you were talking about the data, I understood the first part, gate arrival, and I understood the third part, checking in terms of the passport, getting through and being scanned. How does the middle bit? How do you know when someone's at the arrivals hall?
So we're going to use average walk times. So it means we're producing an estimate, essentially. But Border Force have a series of data sets that record the average time taken to walk from the gate to the back of the arrivals hall, and we essentially subtract that value from the two endpoints.
Yeah, and you'll have assumptions on people going to the toilet and all those kind of things as well.
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we had loads of people go to airports and basically stand at a gate and walk to the back of the hall, and we recorded it. That's what happened.
Thanks, Fiona James from ONS. So I really like the technical thinking that you've done and the kind of front-facing customer service, like a new data source, new service kind of thing, really like that. But to what extent have you spoken to the kind of airport operators or commercial providers in terms of, it's essentially kind of the same line of questioning just around benefits? Or have you not yet had the opportunity to
So to go
engage
to that
them?
stage, it's far more commercial, and I think we need to before we're allowed to go and do that, we kind of need a bit more, the funding would allow us to start having those conversations. But currently, the port operators fund CCTV. Manchester have their own system called Blip, which is monitors mobile traffic, but it can't tell different types of passengers. It can't tell staff versus actual passengers. So you can imagine, like, when we're getting information from these feeds, they're not very accurate. So if we can say to the airport, do you know what, you don't need to fund these systems anymore, and we can actually come up with accurate, more accurate assessments and involve them in the conversations in terms of what they deem to be okay, and we can sort of include them at that stage. They are an important factor of that, but if we can say, we can save you money because you don't need to fund these systems which aren't used, Border Force don't use them.
I was thinking of the incentives in a kind of broad operating environment. Yeah.
Rather than the port operators or...
Yeah, for airlines, for example. If, for example, they want to tell a story to their customers about how long they've got to wait or not wait to get on there, and, for the average Joe.
Yeah, I think more comms and things, like the Disneyland thing. If you know, so my thought was, you're on a plane, and you've landed, so now you can check, what's the time currently? I've got a small child with me. Do I go to the loo now, or do I go to the back of the hall? And sort of a bit more comms, and just so people are a bit more, customer experience, I feel, is quite a big thing for port operators. They want their customers happy, and that could be a real driver for that.
I think that's really good feedback, though, that we've concentrated on technical issues for this first part, and our next stage is to, as you say, bring in more stakeholders to understand their opinions.
And that's perhaps something to think about if you get through to the next round, is just hone that a little bit more. Thank you very much, team. Excellent presentation. Congrats.